There's no intro.
Coming out the jacket cause we're turning up the heat. I wanna see you clapping when you get about your seat. It's time to make it happen when we hit these streets. I'm coming in hot and I can't be beat. Watch out now. Everybody watch out. Watch out.
Welcome to episode 58. We are live on Agencyphonics. I'm here today with Remeny Armitage. Oh, but isn't there a royal on the end as well, Remeny?
That's my married name. My my professional name is my maiden name because everyone knows me as
today. And welcome everyone. As always, a couple of quick thank yous to our wonderful sponsors, Forecast, the project management software, who without them we would struggle a lot to fund all of the great work we do in our not-for-profit social enterprise community, Agencynomics even, and of course this podcast. So we're eternally grateful for them and all of their support. If you haven't seen their project management software, go check it out. And lots of our clients are using it, and I'm always hearing lots and lots of positive comments from people back about it. So there's my good shameless plug for them this morning. So Remeny, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, the subject that today we're really going to talk about in a lot more detail in a little bit is all about surveying clients and the importance of engaging with an agency, engaging with their clients almost independently to get back some feedback, some insights into various different areas, and we'll delve into that. But first of all, I really wanted, I'm sort of fascinated by your background and sort of, you know, how you got to this, to having a company where you provide this service. And it'd be great if you could just share with us, you know, how your journey in agency world began and some of those highlights along your career.
Okay, wow. Well, yes, I'm a bit of a digital dinosaur. I started in agency land in '99 with the agency reading room. I was employee number 6 in a little office in Islington. And then while I was there for 5 years working with Margaret Manning. And I learned lots from her over the 5 years I was there. I did everything from marketing, biz dev. I was a project manager, consultant, got lots of websites built. I didn't do the website, but, you know, I didn't build them myself, but, you know, did all the management of it, and helped build the profile of the company. When I left, I think it was about 60. And then, of course, it grew even bigger than that after I left. And I learned tons there. And it was a great digital agency kind of starting point. I was there, obviously, from the beginning of the dot-com boom to the explosion to the...
Well, I really connect with this because I started in '99 as well. And I remember Reading Room, you know, and Margaret being, you know, a competitor, a frenemy. I mean, you had a different sector to us, but I think our growth journeys were quite similar for quite a long part. And I remember I used to have an agency founders dinner that I used to organize, and so did Margaret. And one day she rang me up and said, "Listen, and should we just bring them all together?" And so we did. We kind of merged the two together, and she came to a couple of our events as well. So yeah, it brings back a lot of memories actually of that time. And Reading Room were a fantastic agency. They grew extremely, you know, well through that period of the noughties.
Yes, yeah, it was a fascinating time.
Government, a lot of sort of government and big sort of, was it like more sort of education and government type websites at the time?
The first big client was GlaxoSmithKline, and as they were rebranding, and it was kind of that was the first big one, and then from there it kind of grew, and they did quite a lot of government, a lot of charity, you know, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was, you know,
you did quite a lot of roles in those early stages, so you were obviously learning different areas of the business. Where did you end up sort of settling? What sort of role was it that you kind of found the love?
I think probably marketing. I mean, it was all about building relationships. It's what I do now. You know, it's kind of that understanding of the people although I did love the project management side as well. And I mean, at Reading Room, when I was there, it was, as you said, a lot of roles. I was probably doing 5 people's roles because, as I say, I was number 6. And so I was managing and consulting on website builds and telling clients what a website was. I remember sort of describing websites to lawyers. We did a lot of professional services stuff. I remember describing websites as brochures that actually change. Rather than having your brochures in the corner getting dusty, you can build things and make things happen. And it was an exciting time. I remember when kind of accessibility came about, and we were talking to people like Julie Howell when she was at RNIB and realizing that things were happening on the accessibility front. We needed to change the way things were going. I remember talking about mobile, WAP, wasn't it WAP?
Yeah, that's right.
And
72 phones with a little
yes.
bit.
And we were all like, this is just ridiculous. That's not going to happen. But of course it did. And so they were very proactive about, they were very innovative and thought a lot about the future. So, I mean, it was, as I say, it was a massive learning curve. And
it's also just really interesting for people listening that, when you run a small agency and everyone's like, oh, we've got so many hats to wear, so many jobs to do. And, you don't forget those big agencies that are out there now, they all started in the same place. They all started with a small team where everyone's doing each other's job. And I think it's something that's quite interesting. It's come up a lot in the last week for me. And it's just a reminder that agencies don't work that well when they're very small. As they get bigger and bigger, they turn from everyone in the team being a generalist to a specialist, and get bigger. Just the business starts to work a bit better because it just needs the scale to get everyone in the right seat, doing the right job. And in the early days, it is quite a challenge. It's fun, but you have to kind of do lots of different jobs often. So
yeah, we were I was there when they first started opening new offices. I was director of one of the first new satellite office, and then they opened up in Australia, and it was interesting times.
Yeah, so you've got COVID in your house, so I'm hoping that cough isn't me at the early.
I know. I suddenly thought, I found out half an hour ago it's entered our house.
Show live, you're going to go down with Omicron.
Don't.
So when you were towards the end of the journey with Reading Room, what was the role? Was it a marketing role? Was it more new business that you were doing then?
It was kind of a combination. It was probably primarily marketing.
Yeah,
and it was all about building the profile of the business and building the profile for Margaret. So we were very sector specific and very focused on building her profile as a thought leader in the sector, which was a really interesting approach. And it worked.
Pretty much ahead of its time in many ways, because today it's a given that most founders have got to work on their personal brand, right? So
yes.
So what were the lessons? If you had to share a lesson, do you think from that early stage at Reading Room that you learned that with people today, would it be about the importance of getting? Because Margaret's not an out and out extrovert, is she? I mean, was she an accountant by trade?
She started as an accountant. Yeah. She was very good at public speaking and writing and getting. I suppose my big lesson from that time was very much choose a sector, a niche, and get focused on and build those relationships within that sector and build that credibility within that sector, so that you can actually stay focused. And then, I think that's probably from that time. And and ongoing. I've always applied that. I then went on to Precedent and was there for 10 years. Again, starting with marketing and then moving into business development, relationship building. And so I think for me, it's all about building human relationships and figuring out where your ideal clients are and going there.
Yeah, and Precedent are pretty impressive. Are a pretty impressive agency. So you again there you were doing more of a business development role, it sounds like now, or not?
I started doing marketing. I was very focused on building their profile within certain sectors. So, the membership sector, we did a lot in the health sector, education, and probably every university marketing department knew who I was because I built those relationships. And we did white papers, roundtables, events, seminars and stuff, which were really successful and brought lots of people in. I think, again, for me, the biggest learning was make sure that you've got a good culture, listen to your clients. That's where I kind of started doing what I do with the client care, client listening, and make sure that you are the best at what you do in a particular sector, and then that can differentiate yourself. I think one of the biggest problems within agencies, I believe, is how do you differentiate yourself? And I think if you've got a niche, if you've got a sector you are bloody brilliant at, then you've got a much better chance of being different in that space.
It's interesting because I'm a massive fan of niche services and keeping services niche, and the sectors I am a fan, but I've seen so many people listening to the show have heard me say before, I worry so much when agencies niche on their sectors, because I've seen so many go under because the niche gets hit hard, unless it's like pharma or certain areas. I find that it's making sure, and you mentioned there, Preston, you had a few different niches they focused in. I think it's really important to find the periphery around a niche, and don't as well, because sometimes I find with clients, yes, of course, the marketing works better. It's so much easier when you have a niche to get in and to, like, for me, I worked in sports, and it was easy for me to build a fantastic network in sports and to infiltrate it. And then on the other side of the coin, there are some people who they have almost so many sectors, they never ever able to build, like, and I had this recently, I've got a client who's got a client in sports and as well. And for me, I was like all over the whole industry, the events. I knew everyone, and everyone knew me to be a thought leader of what I knew about. And they're struggling because they've got so many sectors, they can't get to those events close enough. But yet sometimes, because they've got all these different sectors, they've got this demand coming in, because it's very weird sometimes. I'm still, for me, it's funny, some of the fastest clients I work with just don't have a niche, and I don't see definitely the correlation. But what it is it definitely is a bit easier if you are able to focus, isn't it, in one area. And so yeah, I'm still kind of really confused on the whole subject, if I'm honest, because I see the patterns. That's my problem.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting you say that about, you've seen companies fold. Unfortunately, Precedent did close a few years ago, and of course, Reading Room was sold, a few years back as well, and has, I think, pretty much closed as well. I'm not sure whether that's the niching or what it was. It's different things, different factors, but it is easier. But I suppose try to choose a sector that is never going to go away.
I do like what you're saying there, because it's clear from that experience that you had, that you did, like you mentioned about the universities, all knowing who you are. And that obviously gave you a lot of insight, like me, what it's like when because most sectors are quite small. When you narrow it down, the niche, actually, there's not as many people working in that niche than you think, is there? It's like, I think at the time when I was in Sport Remeny, I think I worked out there was only about 250 marketing managers working in probably the sports clients I could potentially work with. And that's not a lot of people to really meet and to get to know. So that one of the advantages of niching down and then building, but then infiltrating those areas and building connections in that space is you can very quickly start to know everyone. And now almost like everyone helps introduce you to each other, and you can, and it kind of makes the world quite small.
Yes, although it can cause risks, like if you mess up in that, you screw up on one or two clients, you've destroyed your reputation. Or, I mean, again, I wasn't the only one who had a face within Precedent within that sector. Paul, who owned the company, he was very well known in the sector as well. But, at the events, we used to go to the university sector events, case conferences and stuff. And because people knew who I was, it was very easy. I could have those conversations. But when I was away, having my kids and stuff, that human connections and relationships was not so easy to build. And so there is that risk of if you have one or two people who are the absolute kind of recognized face within your sector, within your company, you're running a risk. So
something that you just mentioned that I think really glues our conversation today really well, which is, you talked about, the two agencies that you work with, even my own agency that I built doesn't exist today. And that is that agencies, they don't last forever. Like all businesses, they either they either hit a point where perhaps their products or services are no longer relevant. You know, they haven't reinvented themselves for what's going to happen next, because agencies are almost like the demands today, you know, when you and I first started out, are very different from clients around digital than they were back then, right? They're much more sophisticated. And actually, what I've realized is that I've said, by the way, still, like, I mean, even a few weeks ago, a really well-known agency, you know, ceased trading, that's been around for many, many years. And often what I find is it can happen from different reasons. It could be that they've been bought and they've been absorbed. It could be that, you know, it could be from, I'll show you another good example. I mean, I think the most common one, if I'm honest with you, is probably that the sales drop off because what they're selling is no longer in demand. It's been commoditized, and, you know, and that probably is one of the main reasons. But what you do as part of your service, which we're going to come on to, is obviously helping to talk to clients around where their changing demands are. I think too many agencies are so they don't see the wood through the trees. They're stuck in the day-to-day of running their business. I see this all the time, and what the clients want potentially is changing, but because the team will know and do one thing, and they're not really investing in learning what's the next in future, they're just almost like blindly sort of carrying on, still building, you know, or delivering a certain service that actually is just getting more saturated, more competitive, more in-house. So it'd be really good to explore to you whether you come across that in a minute often or not, you know, because I think if anyone listening wants to future-proof their agency and make sure it doesn't suddenly find itself being disrupted or commoditized, or, you know, or going out of business because no one wants what they do anymore, then I think what you do is a good way to prevent that. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's not really a question there, more of a statement, but
I like that statement. That's good.
So tell me about Brilliant Human. Like, how did that get started? And you know, and can you maybe just give us a little bit of an example of how it works with you?
Yeah, thanks. So Brilliant Human, we are my business is all about understanding your clients, truly understanding what they think of you and how you can feed that into your business. So I'm all about humanizing business and building better human relationships with your clients. And the focus of what I do essentially is I interview people's clients. Obviously, my background is agency, so most of my clients are in the agency space, and I will speak to a range of different clients for a business. And because I'm impartial, I step back. I ask quite difficult questions, which actually would be quite difficult conversations for an agency owner to have with their clients, and to get honest answers. And so the work I do pulls out just amazing insight for businesses that can help them to grow, to look at their business strategy, their marketing strategy, understand who their core clients are, their best clients are, their ideal clients, what differentiates them, helps them with their positioning. And actually, you know, what you were saying, this idea of understanding what your clients really want. So a number of my clients, they may have complained about a certain thing, or they've said, we want the business to be more strategic and to understand our business better, which enables me to help my clients identify new services or products, which is actually what their clients are asking for, as opposed to assuming you know what your clients want. Ask them.
Yeah, I think from my own experience here, you know, we used to do the same thing. We used to form our own conclusions about what our clients did and didn't want based on, like, I remember we would take ideas into our clients in the early stages. None of them would ever buy them, so we just gave up trying, right? So you know, rather than persisting, or rather than trying to understand more about what they wanted, we just kept trying. We sort of gave up taking ideas into them that they probably didn't want or need necessarily anyway. But it sounds like a really obvious thing, but I think when you're working with a client, I think the clients often will tell you different things as well. I like the fact that you're saying you go in there independently, and I think that creates. I mean, I remember this story where I lost a pitch once, Remeny, and they told me I'd lost the pitch, for example, because of, you know, a story around me not having the right level of UX technology in the business. And then when I met the guy a few years later, after I sold the business, he said, "Oh no, you didn't win it because you weren't based in London." And he said, "I just couldn't really tell you that at the time because it felt like a bit of a hard letdown, geography." But it just goes to show how clients don't always want to tell the agency or you directly the truth. But I'm sure you get told all sorts of things. And tell the agency, are they quite shocked and surprised often?
Yes, it's fascinating. I mean, you know, it's that kind of, I mean, the other day I was interviewing someone and they were saying that the client was the agency were really good at what they do. They really like them. But one of the problems they're having is that they're always coming up with solutions. And that's great, except for the fact they don't understand the business enough to enable them to come up with solutions. And he said, you know, if they asked more in-depth questions, the right kind of questions, I would probably, and they'd really work to understand my business, I would give them more work. And I would probably introduce them to more people in the organization as a big brand. But instead of which I'm tending to be a bit hesitant to tell them things because this relationship is a little bit kind of, it sort of gets a bit annoying when they just come up and go, "Oh, we could do this and we could do that." Well, how can you say that if you don't know what I want? And I think that kind of conversation that would be very difficult.
In the early days of our business, actually. So I think that's quite, I can see that being quite a common issue with small agencies. And services, we're not really kind of getting into your business, trying to understand what your challenges are, and actually, you know, and demonstrating that we understand your business so that we're able to help you, you know, make better informed choices around ways that, you know, we could work together to improve the business objectives.
So I think the trouble is often people, you know, that they'll get defensive if the client starts to talk to them about this sort of thing, whereas I don't. And so clients are more open with me. I do make sure that everything is confidential if they want it to be confidential. So I give them an opportunity, you know, to say, actually, I don't want you to say, you know, this, but usually I do feed everything. I do generally feed everything back. I mean, the ones that the most common is people will say, "Oh, they're really good value. They're really good. We use them because they're cheap." And it's like, well, you need to up your pricing. Don't tell the agency we said that.
Do you get that often? Do you often get, I mean, in fact, there's the question for you. What's the most common bits of feedback, I guess, that from when you talk to clients that they tell you about the agencies? What's the most common, you know, things they feedback on?
There's three things that is just, I'd say almost every one of my clients has some element of this, and it's lack of communication, lack of processes, and lack of proactivity. Of course, all three are really intertwined. But you know, the processes just, you know, it's fairly obvious, kind of niggly, just get those processes in place. I had a client the other day I was interviewing, who's complaining that they didn't have the processes they hadn't asked for a design brief. So they just designed something without a brief. And if they had those processes in place, they would have saved a lot of time, because the client was irritated because they produced something and said, "Okay, now you can have some amends." And they're like, "Well, it's not what I asked for." So you need those processes. Lack of proactivity can be kind of lack of proactivity of picking up the phone or engaging with people on the communication side. But it's also a lot of agencies, I think, like you were saying earlier, is they're stuck in the thick of doing the work, and they lose sight of the fact that if they're a bit more proactive about their thinking and their strategic innovation, then they can do more for their clients. Or if they're proactive in asking about the business's 5-year plan, or really almost getting into board level with their clients, they can then be more proactive with their thinking and their delivery without being salesy. But so actually being more proactive with your thinking is just so important. And then lack of communication. Again, you know, people need to be braver about picking up the phone and actually speaking to their clients, you know, nudge them, be more kind of engaging. And you know, I had one client, who was complaining when I was talking to my client's client. They said that they didn't come to a meeting. But my client said, "Well, we emailed them like 5 times and they didn't reply." So, well, why didn't you pick up the phone? And so the client was like, it was just so annoying. They didn't turn up, but just because I didn't see my emails, you know. And so it's kind of make sure you're proactive with your communication is really important.
Yeah. So when I work with agencies, I'm always encouraging them, and in fact, we use this as well at Cactus in our business. We encourage them to do a net promoter score. So we're always asking our clients to almost, and it's almost like a temperature test, an NPS. Like you ask your clients to, ask them how likely that they are to recommend to a friend or a colleague on a scale of 1 to 10, and obviously what you're trying to do is you're trying to get as many 9s and 10s as you can, because if you get that, then your clients are pretty much evangelistic for you. Someone gives you a 9 or a 10, they're probably going to recommend you to other people. They're probably going to be more vocal. And likewise, if they're scoring you a 5 out of 10, then it's an early warning system for me that they're unhappy and they're probably going to leave. And it's not always easy getting clients who are busy. I find to do this, and a lot of the time when we're putting NPS in, we're trying to make sure the agency is assessing the expectation right with the client to say, look, we're going to be surveying you, you need to be engaged. It does help us and getting them to buy into that process. But the reality is that, sometimes I'll get the feedback, oh, well, it doesn't really give me really good client feedback. And I was just not really designed to do that. It's designed to do a temperature check of, where are they at? Really, ultimately, that's down to you to go further. Now, you can do NPS probably once a quarter without irritating clients, maybe once every couple of months. But with what you do, it's the same theory, really, which is it's a way to add value to your clients to say, just to let you know, we're going to survey you on a periodic basis, like maybe annually or biannually. We do a client survey, and and you would go in. It isn't like a every month thing, is it? With you, it's much more like sort of a couple of times a year, and it's quite a significant, in-depth survey, isn't it? It's not like NPS is very shallow temperature checking.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is much more comprehensive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the NPS side, I think it's a good starting point, as you say. It's a temperature test, but I think there's a danger of. I mean, I've had a number of clients say, "Oh, we do NPS quarterly," and actually, if I'm honest, the feedback I've had is that actually that can be too much and actually can irritate people, as you mentioned. But I think the problem is, well, you often get the same clients answering, and you might have Bob who, last week you had a meeting with him and you did something in green. He hates green, and so he's going to give you a 6, and he's going to screw up all your scores, and you've got to be careful not to trust the NPS too much, because it can become meaningless. I had a meeting with a client who actually really likes this agency and is a really, close to an advocate, but he scored everything a 7 pretty much. And it's like, trusting a number isn't enough. And I think you're in danger of, because obviously you can get the NPS score once you kind of average. So I think it's like 9 or a 10 is good. A 7 and an 8 doesn't get counted, and then anything below that you get a really rubbish score. And so I think there's a real risk of devaluing yourself. And so although I do ask the NPS question, I obviously get the insight. Typically I'll have 15 questions that I go in depth with, and I do put scores against a lot of them, so that then if you are going to be comparing things with your, from one time to another, you can see how you're improving, hopefully. And but I think it's about that human insight, that kind of real in-depth insight that you get from the customers when you speak to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's really important to stress that. I have to say that for me, NPS has been a total game changer. I say it because I think in our own business, having done it and pursued it, it's not perfect. I accept it's not perfect. But I tell you something now, I've been into a couple of clients when they've got a 5 and they've saved £500,000 a year clients. They never have known otherwise, because it, maybe in the middle of the year, that it was someone junior in the team who actually had a big impact, but had basically cut out. So, and I've seen other examples where people have taken agencies with 7 and 8s and neutrals and turned those customers into advocates.
Yeah.
and suddenly seen a pipeline transform where leads from client referrals have trebled overnight because they're getting those clients. So I have seen some real positives, but it is a temperature. But I was just trying to make the point here, which is there's a difference with yours. It's like the frequency. You can't do it every month, right? So
No.
even every quarter. Like, is it once or twice a year? What do you?
I mean, generally, I used to do it, so it's kind of every 6 months. But actually, I think because it's so in depth, clients, it's too much. Unless a client's unhappy. If a client's unhappy, absolutely, you should do it within 6 months, if not sooner. If a client's happy, I think every year is probably fine. I think it is important to do them on a regular basis, because I think for me, it's about being accountable to your clients. And, you know, the idea of a survey, I think it's more than a survey, because of course it's in-depth conversation, and it opens up conversations that are could be difficult to have, and also opens up opportunities. And I mean, another thing that a lot of my clients ask me to do is to list the things that they do to the client. And then it's amazing how little often a client understands what a business can do, because, you know, gosh, how many people have lost clients because they've gone to another agency to do something else which they could have done? How annoying. And so making sure you are on that as well is really important.
You know, that for me is something that I try weirdly on the marketing side to try. That's the weak point when you're trying to win a client away from somebody else, because you play on the fact you said the 3 weaknesses there are proactivity, communication, and what was it?
Processes.
And actually, if an agency's marketing is targeting someone proactively with ideas on what they can do, and their existing agency isn't doing it, I remember having a client once, Remeny. I'm sure you have a similar story, where I would take in ideas to this client. They'd never buy any of them. And then one day I lost the account, and they always said, we haven't got any money, we haven't got any money, we haven't got any money. And then one day I lost the account, and they were spending £300,000 with somebody else. I was like, we never had any money with us. At the time, I would blame the client for that. Well, that doesn't make sense to me, or there's something going on there. But now I've done this job, you know, helping agencies on the other side. I see what an idiot I was, because on reflection now, I can see that, you know, the other person probably wasn't going to the budget holder. They were going to find the investment funds that were happening, because they knew the company had reserved money that they would be looking to invest in new ideas. Whereas I'm going to the budget holder who's stuck with a fixed budget, who hasn't got any more, and they're telling me they've got no money. And it's, you know, understanding that actually there are different pots of money available within the company. I guess, do you find that kind of stuff as well? Do you talk about budgets and investment, and do you sort of find?
I don't go into much depth on the budget side of things, because I sort of think that's slightly crossing a line. I do ask about money. I like, are they good value? And so you get you know, again, it's a bit of a temperature check. I think it's an interesting one. I'm always, because I've got a marketing and biz dev head on, or hat that I can never quite get off. I'm always looking for opportunities, and what often happens is someone will say, "Oh, actually, I should make sure that I'm making introductions to this person within that team, or whatever." So I often get opportunities or identify services, but I'm always really conscious not to be salesy, because I think that instantly.
I think that's your secret sauce, because I think the best salespeople are able to ask difficult questions, whereas the founders, we're scared because we always work on a relationship. We sometimes don't want to ask difficult questions. Whereas if it's dev, obviously they're much better at asking questions to delve and to dive and to find things. And I guess that's what makes you so good at what you do, because you are able to ask some of those questions, uncover things, not necessarily budget, of course, but uncover things, and without, you know, by probing and not just being passive and just, you know, asking static questions. So experience probably adds massively to that.
It reminds me, one of the things you said earlier was, you know, challenging. I think, again, agencies are often nervous of challenging their clients, because they don't want to piss them off, and they want to you know, give them things that the clients are asking for. But I know from the interviews I do, and from past experience, a little bit of challenging and open conversation can be an amazing thing. And I think that that's something that if people can be not aggressively challenging, but, you know, actually have those conversations and be more open to that. But then I suppose, again, that's the sort of the less experienced people, they're going to probably struggle with that kind of challenging approach. But I think it's good to clients appreciate it sometimes.
Well, there's that famous book, isn't there, The Challenge of Sale, that identifies challenges are the best salespeople. But equally, I know from experience that sometimes, you know, I challenge people and people don't take it very well. Majority of times they're grown-ups and they do, and they accept it, and they kind of go, oh yeah, okay, I can see why that would work better for us. And, you know, and it's trying to make sure that you're able to communicate it in a way to keep that client have an open mind as well, when you're trying to show them enough evidence to back up what it is you're challenging them on. Which,
of course, is why I love what I do, because I can be really challenging, but of course I've got the client evidence to back it up. And so I will often give harsh feedback, and it's not stuff people want to hear. It's frightening, it's scary. Taking me on is you know, you've got to be quite brave, because actually I'm not necessarily going to
hear the things you don't want to hear, maybe.
But I always get really excited when I get the difficult clients and the difficult feedback, and because I'm like, oh, fantastic, they can now improve or identify something that's a problem.
The more you find wrong, in a way, the more the ACO, although it will hurt their ego a bit, the reality is they've probably got more room for improvement, right?
No, it's fantastic. I've had one client that everyone loved them, and I was thinking at one point, what am I going to say? But actually, with that one, we identified a new service, and we were able to increase their pricing. So that was good. But I mean, I think on the most extreme one I had was a client that was a big tech platform, and their clients were really unhappy. I was brought on to help them build a business case for getting new clients. But actually what ended up happening was I interviewed their clients, massive brands they had. And after the first 3 interviews, their average scoring was 22% satisfaction rate. And I was like, actually, you've got to stop marketing, stop selling, start serving your clients and fixing these massive issues and holes you've got in your business. And until you start to prove you're trying to improve your relationship with your clients, I've got to stop. I can't ethically continue. And so after 6 months, I was pulled back in. I started doing the interviews again, and the satisfaction rate went up to 74%.
Wow.
And I think just by listening to their clients, it enabled them to build their reputation again. And actually, they were just having honest conversations. They totally overpromised and underdelivered. And once they addressed that, they were able to improve. So, yes, they did not want to hear what I said.
You've come from, a strong digital native background. So in a way, you're probably like me, you've seen the benefits of almost splitting out project management and account management, because I think what I've learned is that, to really offer a good customer experience, you've got to have client service people who have time, and they're not just doing the work, serving the clients. When you're small, you don't have a choice, because people do that AM PM role, and
yes,
you get a bit bigger, you split it out. But the traditional agencies always had the account execs effectively doing the project management. But it's even now I still see account management titles where they want them to be proactive, just leaning inwards and becoming almost helping the project managers push the work through and default that side of things. But as you say, the process bit is important. That's what they want. So you've got to have good project management in an agency today. The communication has to mean that the client service person has to be, good at communicating and set expectations, I guess, with the clients on the frequency. And then lastly, being free enough to be proactive from a strategic side of things, to take in and challenge and understand the commercial client's business and stuff like that. So I guess, the things that you're saying come out as problems are ultimately, I think, big challenges that our industry faces, as a whole. Sometimes until someone like you comes in and goes, here's the evidence,
yes,
no one's really doing anything about it a lot of the time. And it's funny, because the most common time that I hear about the success of what you do is weirdly when someone goes through a rebrand, because a lot of them go through a rebrand, they'll get someone independent to go and ask, basically, you know, what do their customers think of them? And of course, it's not what you do. It's a very sort of, you know, it's a small similar part of it. They then have this epiphany. They go, oh, well, our customers said that they would buy more from us if we told them what we sold. And then what happens is they talk about it and nothing happens, and they don't rebrand for another 3 to 5 years. So I think it's also, I think there's definitely a bit of a realization, anyone listening who's gone through the exercise, who's experienced that for a rebrand, this is what Remeny does basically, or, you know, as a company, to go in every year and just keep getting that feedback. And I mean, you must have some brilliant examples of where you've mentioned a couple already of where you brought some kind of return on investment in, like done, because I'm imagining that if people are spending money with you, they want to see, hopefully, not just ability to fix customer, but some real ROI. What can you give some examples of some of the things that maybe there's some of the benefits agencies might see from doing surveys?
Well, I mean, happily, I do have some nice examples. I mean, one example was a client that I worked with. They had the typical issues, the proactivity and processes issues, and they were really good at acting on that and listening to their clients, and they changed things, and they really had quite a young team, and they trained the team, and they did things right. A year later, I did the interviews again, and it was so interesting because I didn't get any of the same complaints, but all of them, all their clients pretty much bar one, said they had to have a more consultancy-led arm. They were a digital marketing agency, and so they were then able to introduce a consultancy service that they didn't have before.
Yeah,
they're making 40% profit within a year. I mean, another example is retainers. You know, often I'll be brought in, say, 6 months before a retainer is due. Speak to the client, nothing to do with the retainer, I don't mention it, but actually by speaking to your clients.
That's a good idea. I've not thought of that.
So if you speak to your clients when you know you've got a retainer,
out of 6 months, get you in early to find out what. I love that.
And then you can, if there are any issues with, it might be team, it might be processes, it might be design, whatever it might be, fix it, and then you can, quick. And then, you know, I've had examples of clients where, you know, I mean, again, finding new products and services. And I mean, I had a lovely stat the other day, which was kind of within just 5 interviews, there was like 10 times ROI off the back of the interviews that I do, because it just opens up those difficult conversations. And
do you ask them around what other services they're looking to purchase?
No, that's too salesy. But towards the end, I will, depending how the interview's gone, I will then say, are you aware they do X, Y, and Z? And then if they say no, I'll say, well, actually, would you like me to get the team to speak to you? And I mean, the other thing that it's really good for, of course, is
you're not able to spot if they do, like if they've got any new demands for what they want to buy. There's no real way of spotting that from what you do without coming across too salesy. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, if it does sometimes come up where it's identified something that they might want or they're thinking about, or, you know, I might ask, you know, have you got other things coming up? But I am quite conscious not to ask too many.
So you've got to get that fine line.
Because I think I open those, I say, they might give me a hint, or I have had clients say, well, we're thinking of moving with, you know, within the next 6 months. And then I'll say, well, why? You know, and then I'll say, well, you know, obviously the team will be engaged with you and talk to you about this. And so I'll often, after each of my interviews, I feed back to my clients so that they're aware of the issues that need to be addressed straight away. And so I call up and give the either happy news or slightly stressed out news that they need to change things quick. And then at the end of that, I'll put a report together after I've done, 10, 15 interviews. I then put a report together with the recommendations and the key themes that come out, which enable them to then act, using all this insight. But they're getting really good idea throughout the whole process because I feed back straight away.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'm realizing now about you as well is I think the importance of continuity, because I have seen people run ad hoc surveys either themselves or using like freelancers to go in and ask questions, like maybe, I don't know, freelance marketing people. But actually having you get consistently, to me, strikes me as something that where you can see the pattern, the shifts almost. You probably would know and see where you probably get a feel for where the improvements have actually come.
And also I've already built up that trust from the first interview. And although I'm an outsider and they know that, I'm compared, people have said that I'm like a marriage counselor for businesses or for agencies, because I'm that safe person, and because things can be confidential, it means that they are honest, and they're very honest. But I think because I've got the agency experience, I've got a pretty good idea of how things are, how things are working on the agency side as well as the client side. But
I've asked you this before, and I can't remember what you said the answer was, which was, what happens, like do you ever get asked to? I remember this time at Blue Halo. I remember strongly in my agency where my business development person and me, we were celebrating a whole year where we hadn't lost a single pitch. That was mainly because we were qualifying really aggressively because we had so much business. We didn't have very competitive, but we did have competitors, and we won a lot. And then I remember, like a year later, losing 7 pitches in a row. And the karma of going through a year where you've won every 7 in a row.
Ouch.
Do you offer a service where you would go in as well to independently investigate that, like to say, can I just, or do you ever do sort of post-pitch feedback as well?
So I do. I can interview people when they've won or lost a client, because it's fascinating finding out why have they chosen you? What did they like about you? What was the marketing message that drew them to you? What was it that was the proposal? Was that, what was the pitch like? And then, but equally, why did you lose it? And then also if you've lost a project, or a client leaves you, it's really valuable to actually have those talks if that's going to happen. Find out. So I mean, so typically the way I work is, like I said, I'll do sort of the interviews with the existing clients, range of clients from happy to advocates to unhappy, unengaged, and then do a report. But then I do retainer where it might be those pitch ones, it might be the lost clients, it might be those clients that are just, you're about to hit into a firestorm.
Sometimes that would be quite ad hoc, I guess, because it might not be that many in a row. That's the only thing. But you're still happy to do that kind of stuff. Because I'm sure I spoke to you about this before, but it's something that's on my mind at the moment about someone. So that's good to know you do that. Because we all go through it. Every agency will have. I like the fact you also talk, because often when I ask people why they want to pitch, I do get sort of 1 or 2 the same type of answers come back. But there's probably more than just those 1 or 2 reasons why they want it, and it's probably good to understand, more holistically what that is. So
I mean, it's interesting. Like, it reminds me of one of the clients I interviewed, their clients, and almost all their clients mentioned the pitch process and the way they were in pitches, and how their proposals was just second to none.
Oh, really?
And so it was really interesting, because I'd never had that before. It was just like, one of my questions is, why do you work with X? And that's was like all of them mentioned. They were just so.
And as someone who used to do business, you're a bit like, I need to have a look at their proposal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they were really, they really shone, and but they're a client that they're hugely well respected for what they do, but they needed to be more strategic with their proactivity, because they were really reactive and really good. But they just needed to step out of the day-to-day. And I think that's one of the things that one of the reasons I started doing what I do is, having worked in agencies, I think one of the everyone can relate to and has problems with is that I'm working day-to-day I'm working on either new business or project now, but then actually building those relationships beyond that, when the project's finished 6 months later, are you continuing those relationships? Because they're people and they might move to a different business. So if you've kept that relationship going, you've got to put that into your processes. I'm not saying, I think it's important to say, as much as obviously I love doing what I do, and I'm, it's really valuable to have an impartial person doing the interviews. Make sure that as an agency owner, you're doing those as well, and you're engaging with your clients. Put that in the diary. You're speaking to those clients at this time, so you build those relationships.
Do you get much feedback around client experience, the value adds that the agency should offer or don't offer, or?
Yes, I mean, again, one of my questions is often, is there anything that the agency should stop doing because you find it irritating, or have you got experience of from other agencies that this agency shouldn't be doing? Because actually, we've all had experience of irritating things that a supplier might do, and so you get some quite interesting feedback from that. And actually, the one, I did an interview yesterday or the day before, and the guy was like, this agency isn't alone. Pick up the phone, actually just don't wait. If I haven't replied to an email, pick up the phone. So and then the value adds, again, it's that kind of, it sort of tends to be, it opens up opportunities for new services and stuff. So that we would really like them to do this or not do that. So
do you think it's an age demographic on the phone thing as well? Like, do you find sometimes a senior client, maybe a more because is it a generation thing as well, the phone, or not? Do you think it's just because I definitely think I've seen them like when through the noughties, I would say the phone was used a lot in our business. In the clients I've been doing consultancy last 10 years, I think it's a lot less use. I think there's a lot more behind email and Slack, and I see a lot of evidence of that. But do you think sometimes with the clients I think sometimes it's almost what I'm trying to say is it good persona work for the agency to go, well, what is the demographic of our client? They're going to want us to pick the phone up, right? Because they're not the people who are going to want you hiding behind email. I don't know. Or maybe it isn't an age or demographic thing. Maybe it just generally is. They just don't pick the phone up enough. Because I'm going to suggest that I think the last 10 years of employees are probably less likely to use a phone on phone calls than maybe my generation of CMO, who was commonly saying, pick up the damn phone and call me.
I think it's interesting. I think the demographic thing is there is. I think it tends to be actually, but on the agency side is the younger generation. It makes me sound ancient. The younger generation are afraid of picking up phone because they're not used to it. Like you say, it's not part of the day to day. But actually, so often the biggest complaints from clients is they don't pick up the phone. Actually chase me. Don't wait, because if you've sent me 5 emails and I haven't replied, pick up the damn phone.
I think if I had an agency tomorrow, and I'm sure you'd be the same, I would probably sit down with a client and say, right, tell me how best to speak to you. WhatsApp? Is it what's the way to do this? Is it now? Is it do you want me to pick and I would ask, if I can't get through to you, what should I do? What's the best way? And I'd almost get the client to tell me that, because I think every client probably has their preferred communication methods, and I think it gets the expectation right, doesn't it, almost from the outset? And I think, but I wonder whether during onboarding, whether enough of that attention to detail is thought about as well.
Well, I mean, onboarding is an interesting one, actually, especially in the tech world. I think it's really important to have really strong onboarding processes and think about the way you're engaging with your client. And I think that's a great question that you should be asking, and actually understanding how your clients want to be treated. It's not how, treat people how you want to be treated, because people, everyone's different. You ask them. And so,
do you think clients feel valued? So go back to the last other question, which is around the value. Do you get much, like, There's two questions here. Do the clients say that they're valued, and do they feel like they're getting value from their agencies? I spoke to Tina Fegan, and she was talking about a lot about when she's doing procurement, she's looking for the value that agencies are bringing to the table. For example, one which I repeat too often is her saying, invite the clients to come and join your training sessions. If you're learning something new about the blockchain, bring the client in to learn about it. Let them have access to your training. It's a value add, doesn't cost them anything, but it gives them more knowledge. Do you ever get feedback on anything like that around client experience or should be offering?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good example. But I think it's, I think the idea of the value, I mean, people, it's interesting. I mean, the value, I always do ask a question, are they meeting expectations, and are they hitting, are they good value for money and good value, and I get range of answers, which might be, we think they are expensive, but I think the value is there, and the way they engage with us and they come up with ideas is really good. But equally, as I said, the biggest complaint tends to be that lack of proactivity. So I think if people were more proactive, I mean, it's a really fine line, like you were saying earlier. It's trying to get people, don't bombard people with ideas if you don't understand the business, but if you've proactively tried to learn about the business, then you can value add. So you've got to get that right.
So I've got a great idea for us. I've just popped into my head. I think we should run a survey, and and I know Abby's listening because she wrote a lovely comment a minute ago about being proactive with communication. But I just ask Abby to run a survey in the community, and we should ask the question, and I want you to try and guess now what the result will be. And ask what percentage of agencies actually do have an independent client survey done to review their clients on an annual basis. What percentage of agencies do you think do that? I guess it depends on the size as well, because I guess the bigger they are, probably the more likely they are to do it as well.
Yeah, I mean, so, the big ones, they'll have an in-house person doing it, but who's kind of still independent. I mean, when I did it, when I was a president, I was not working on the projects that I did it.
But still independent.
Well, because if they're not working on the projects, they're a little bit. If they've had no engagement with the project, I think you can still do it. It's not as, I don't think you're going to get probably quite as hard-hitting results as I might get, but I think you're still going to get some answers.
There's going to be no fluffing over the cracks with you.
No, because I dig. I'm not afraid of digging.
Away.
Yeah.
So what do you think as a percentage? 1 in 10 agencies? 1 in 20?
I had a really random number popped into my head. I was like 24% is what popped into my head.
I bet you it's less than 10%, but I reckon probably more will say. I mean, I would honestly tell you, I cannot think of an agency that I've been into in 10 years and done consultancy for that does an annual survey.
Well, of course, my clients do. So
I brought you some clients afterwards because I know I cannot think of.
Yeah.
Think of one. I think, I know there's a lot doing NPS, and I think it's easy, and even that can be quite hard to get up and running. But yeah, we're going to run that survey. We're going to find out. We're going to ask the question.
Really, really interesting.
I think it'd be a good question. I think it'll also raise more awareness, I think, of the importance of doing it. And I think, hopefully people listening today, something has clicked there in their heads that, if you just make this investment once a year, probably also if you're smart about it, I'd probably do it, a little bit before your new financial year, whatever month that is, so that at least for the next year's planning, you probably have some insights into who is likely to spend more, who maybe you need to work more on the service, and may give you some more comfort and confidence around your next year's growth from existing clients.
I mean, I suppose, again, it's sort of them trying to do it so it's through the year as well, because you're speaking to people at different times. And
yeah, how long does it actually? That's a good question. How long does it take, do you think, from start to finish when you initiate a piece of work?
Typically, I say it's about 3 months.
Wow, that's longer than I realised. Okay.
It was usually like a month. Well,
so doing like an annual review, it takes about
3 months, two to 3 months. I mean, because of course, trying to get the right people to do the interviews, that's the thing that's hard. And so, then it takes a couple of weeks because I do very kind of tailored questions, and so there's quite a lot of work goes into it. But it can be done quicker, but it depends on what you want.
I guess the number of clients and all those sorts of things well play a part. Well, I think that's fascinating. I learned something new there. I didn't realize it took us as long to do that, but it, in a way, kind of makes sense to me. But look, I really appreciate you sharing. I think for me, though, the big takeaway there is, understanding that there are going to be constructive feedback from your clients that can improve the way that you operate. And I'm convinced that probably if every agency did this, you would easily be able to demonstrate a return on investment. I mean, you would, without question, be able to say, because there's no doubt you'll find things from the conversations that someone carrying out an independent survey once a year would find.
Yeah,
I'm confident of that. I'm sure you've seen that a lot over the years.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. It's why I do what I do. I love it.
Yeah, well, of course, I bet for you that's success, isn't it? Ultimately, if you manage to do a survey and solve a big problem, stop a client leaving, or find some extra revenue, or find a way to sell more, then that's a result, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's very rewarding. It's great.
Good. So thank you very much for your time this morning, Remeny.
Well, thank you. It's been fun chatting. I
can't believe we've been talking for over an hour.
I know.
It's one of the fastest time Agencyphonics I think I've ever done. But you've really explained it and articulated well. For me, those big takeaway, those three things, the lack of client proactivity, which I know is definitely the thing I hear the most, from clients and friends I know who work with agencies, the lack of process, and then as I know, I guess the reason why I kind of lost, I think probably most of my clients came down to at times poor communication. And, it's interesting that that's on the list as well.
And honesty is with the communication. It's just being honest, So, yeah.
Yeah, I think for us sometimes at times when we were busy, we got a bit too busy. We weren't communicating as frequently as we should have done because we were so busy almost reacting, and sometimes the client would see that as a breakdown. But all lessons learned along the way, all lessons learned. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you.
You've been a wonderful guest. How do people find you, by the way?
Well, my website, www.brilliantandhuman.com, or my LinkedIn profile, so Remeny Armitage Royal.
You got your maiden name on that one.
Yeah, I have. Or actually, so it's LinkedIn/Remeny. I think I'm the only Remeny, really.
That's a great idea, just to put your first name on.
Yeah.
You're very lucky you have a unique name. Listen, thank you for your time. Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the episode. And for episode 58, that is a wrap.